Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm going to give people a couple more minutes to join, and we will start with a bit of housekeeping while we wait. Please check your audio and visual settings for the webinar. If you're having any issues, I suggest rejoining and selecting the correct audio and visual settings. And if you're having any persisting issues, pop it in the question box, and one of us will get back to you. The session today is recorded, and we will email you the recording in a few days, along with some other useful resources. So please feel free to share the webinar recording with any colleagues who might be interested but couldn't make it today. Also, feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A function you can see at the top of your screen. We will go into an audience Q&A at the end of the session. So I hope that was enough time for people to join and we can get started. Welcome to today's webinar about how eBooks are transforming teaching and libraries. The purpose of today's webinar is to discuss how to navigate the digital landscape of higher education from a librarian and faculty perspective, with a specific focus on e-textbooks and how the Sage Catalyst collection can support teaching and learning. So with all that, let's start with some introductions. I'm Alexa, your host today. I'm a marketing manager at Sage, and I will be moderating the discussion today. I'm joined by my two colleagues, Lorna, Group Marketing Manager, who will run the Q&A at the end of the session, and Alina, Marketing Executive, who will help us monitor the questions and support us with the tech. I'm really pleased to welcome and introduce our panelists today, James Stevens and Rebekah Rousi. James is Head of Library Services and University Librarian at the University of Cumbria, with over 21 years of experience in academic librarianship, management, and leadership. James is motivated by enabling access to information, improving the library experience, and empowering students to develop the skills and confidence they need to succeed in academic and work-based context. He is joined by Rebekah today, who is an Associate Professor of Communication and Digital Economy on tenure track at the School of Marketing and Communication at the University of Vaasa, Finland. Rebekah holds a PhD in cognitive science and has specialized in researching human experience via embedded cognition and semiotics in relation to diverse forms of technology. Rebekah's 18 years of university teaching have spanned from visual art and architecture to cultural studies, cognitive science, information systems, and communication studies. I'm very excited to welcome both of them here, and I'm sure we have an exciting discussion to look forward to. Both the University of Cumbria and the University of Vaasa are Sage Catalyst customers. Amongst other topics, we will discuss how the collection supports teaching and learning at their institution. Therefore, before diving into the discussion, I would like to give you a quick overview of the product, especially for those who might not be familiar with it. The Sage Catalyst is a library resource created by Sage and designed to deepen student engagement. The collection includes Sage's premium e-textbooks curated to provide wide coverage across the social science curriculum and the most widely taught courses. As a leading social science publisher, Sage textbooks are rich in pedagogy, internationally facing, and designed to engage students across all levels of the curriculum. Sage Catalyst is designed to meet the demands of a hybrid classroom, offering a full suite of study tools on any device to increase students' engagement. So that was a very quick overview of what Sage Catalyst is. So if you have any questions about Sage Catalyst, please add it to the Q&A section and we will either answer it at the end of the session or follow up with you after the webinar. And now we can move on to start our panel discussion. So Rebekah, James, we've seen lots of changes within higher education over the last few years, which would have impacted you both as well as many other institutions. One of those is, of course, the shift and move to digital, which has been happening for some time. So I'd like to start off with exploring this, and I'd be keen to hear from you. So from your perspective, how have digital teaching and learning tools or other electronic resources made a difference in the education experience?
Many of our students aren't just campus-based anymore. You know, they are degree apprentices. You know, we have lots of paramedics, for example, who are out actually, you know, in work. They have you know, families in the evening as well. You know, so we don't really see the kind of just the, I guess what you would call the ordinary undergraduate campus-based student at the University of Cumbria anymore. And actually, even in our early days, I'm talking about, you talked about 15 years ago or something, or 12 years ago, is when we started to think, how are we going to make sure that our students get the right experience or the similar experience across all these in modes of study and geographical things, and e-resources was something that we identified very early, 12 years ago. In those days, I think there was quite a lot of suspicion from academics, from students about ebooks. I think they didn't quite believe they were real, or they were that the text in the ebook was the same as the text in the print book. It took us a lot of persuading. We don't have to do that persuading anymore, actually, which is a real change for us. In fact, we get our requests from academics and for students are usually, can we have the ebook version before we get the requests for the print.
Can I just jump in here, because I think you've raised some really interesting points there, kind of the perception of faculty, which I think is and how they've shifted, and also kind of the shift in student demographics. But I'm also thinking, obviously there's students that are kind of remote, or you said they're kind of in work, but also I'm thinking, the demographic of students has shifted in terms of what they're expecting and their use of technology and how comfortable they are with it. And I think that's something that's really interesting, and perhaps we've been hearing more of as well, in terms of the expectations or the ease that students have with technology as well. So I think that's, I'm presuming you've kind of noticed that as well. Yeah.
Well, I think this is where we're also cutting into the discussion on sustainability, because many of our students, I mean, it doesn't matter what generation, are becoming increasingly aware of sustainability related issues. So it can feel extremely painful to actually, think that, many trees die in order for them to hold this book in their hot little hands. Or, I mean, if I actually kind of get back to what James was talking about, I mean, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, we were using texts in digital form, but they might not have necessarily been made for the digital form. So, of course, PDFs, photocopies, scans, and then what were we doing? We were printing them. So, I mean, our mindset back then was that we have to print it to make it tangible. These days, with this kind of sustainability thinking in mind, there's less of a tendency to jump straight into printing.
That's so interesting to hear, especially with both of you having so much experience in the education field, and to see that this has already started 12 years ago. But I suspect it even accelerated in the past few years as a result of the pandemic, of hybrid learning. Have you realized after these years a rise in student expectations? And if so, have you had to make any changes as a result?
Should I answer straight away? Because I would like to say, yes, absolutely. Things need to be available now. And it needs to be the right stuff in the right time. And of course, in the right place, which is usually at home or even at work or on the move. So, I mean, once again, I can't really emphasize enough how much student life has changed. And of course, we started talking about the fact that students are remote. I mean, this is really the case for our University of Vaasa. Vaasa is a small city in a remote location on the west coast of Finland. So most of our students and in fact staff actually live all around the country, which also makes it extremely difficult to get to a physical location to borrow a book. So yeah.
James, have you realized something similar? Or
yeah, I would agree with Rebekah. I think students now, expectations are that they're able to access material, the material that are recommended on their reading lists, or that they've come across, that they are able to access it immediately, with as few clicks as possible. I think they there's so much technology in people's lives now. I think they expect to be able to find the library books or the library resources as they do, you know, a TV show on Netflix. You know, that kind of easy, you know, that ease, and for it to look as attractive as well, you know, and that's for it to be presented in an attractive way. So, you know, we you know, in our library plan, we talk about the need to be able to provide what we call friction-free or seamless access to content, either through our discovery tool, you know, our library discovery tool, or via reading list systems. So, you know, having you know, ebooks such as the ebooks available through Catalyst has just made that possible.
I think I was just going to add as well, because I really liked what you said about, well, first of all, how students kind of expect things in a certain visual way, but also just the friction-free element. And I suppose as well, sort of, you know, cost of living increases as well. There is, you know, greater expectation that certain things are provided by their university and that experience. So yeah, I think
that's quite different from when I was at university. I think we expected maybe to buy a few more textbooks ourselves. I think from the, you know, this expectation does put some pressure on libraries, certainly to be able to provide. I mean, we have over 1,300 reading lists, you know, and well, you know, we're probably talking about 20 or 30 items on each, possibly on between, you know, essential reading and recommended reading. So to provide that friction-free access to all that content is a challenge, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's sort of juggling that sort of the student expectation with actually what's feasible and possible.
Yes, absolutely. And we're trying to hide. I mean, that's what we want from the students. We don't want the students to know about, or they know the kind of complexity beneath it all.
All the teachers.
All the lecturers. That's part of our job as well, you know, in the libraries, is to try and hide that complexity. You know, like is it the swan with the legs moving underneath and the look gliding along the lake, you know.
That's so interesting to hear. And it must have been pretty difficult as a librarian to shift the library from a physical space to a more digital one. How have you found that experience, James?
Well, I think, you know, Rebekah was talking about sustainability and you know, having obviously ebooks take up less physical space in libraries, and what students are telling us as part of what we kind of use, we do quite a bit of user experience called UX kind of work with our students to find out what they'd like our libraries to be, you know, so we don't just make assumptions. And they're telling us they want more differentiated learning spaces within when they're actually on campus, and actually having fewer, you know, imposing bookshelves where we can actually break things up a little bit more. We can create what one of my librarians calls nooks and crannies for students to, you know, for individual study or group study. I think so having ebooks takes away some of the physical aspects, but that's not to say though that I don't think there's a place for physical and print to coexist. I do, you know, and there's a lovely phrase I've written this down here by Tom Shaw, who's a deputy director at King's College in London, and he said, "Today's libraries are a synthesis of digital and physical, but with people at their heart," which I wish I'd written that, because I think that's exactly what we're trying to achieve, really. That yeah. But, you know, we noticed during the pandemic, as you'd expect, our print borrowing plummeted, you know, over half. And then since we were back on campus, it hasn't really recovered. You know, it's making some slow recovery, but it's not back to its pre-pandemic levels. Whereas ebooks, as you'd expect, doubled during the pandemic, and actually have continued to rise. The usage has continued to rise since we've been back on campus, as it were, which is telling me quite a lot about what students are wanting and what they're, you know, and what they're needing. But yeah, interesting. We still continue, so we're definitely going to continue with our eFirst approach, but, you know, thinking about how we can make best use of our print collections as well.
Thank you for that insight. And again shows us how student expectations changed. And I think that it's so great that you are asking the opinions of students on what they want. I also agree that we shouldn't just disregard print books, you know, working in publishing. Yeah, but it's all very interesting. So I'd like to explore the topic of ebooks.
Can I just jump in quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Alexa, because I've just noticed a kind of comment in the Q&A, which I think is really useful. So Julie mentioned that, you know, sustainability is a complex one, and so the issues of print and kind of e being you know, it's not simple. There's need for energy and power, and yeah, so just actually, I think that's really important to kind of thank you, Julie, for that comment. That there's so much wrapped up in this, and we can't hope to unpick it here. And as you said, it's not straightforward. But yeah, thank you for that comment.
Thank you. So on the topic of ebooks, Rebekah, I'm interested in what you think is the biggest benefit of ebooks when it comes to teaching and learning.
Okay, so of course, from the student perspective, it's immediacy, you know, accessibility, the ability to be able to gain access anywhere, anytime. And actually, I loved what James was talking about in terms of friction-free, because ironically, when I jumped into cognitive science many years ago, some of our first tasks were to analyze the usability and user experience of online catalogs and ebook collections. And I'm so happy that things have moved forward. I mean, a lot is different within Catalyst as compared to the earlier examples that we were studying. One thing that I actually thought of from the teacher perspective is I find that it helps guide my planning. What I've noticed within Catalyst in particular is they've got you've got a great selection of textbooks. And of course, every now and then, every year or so, you know, you get to the point where you have to kind of update your literature list. You really have to see, you know, what is cutting edge for the time for your subject. And so I'm actually also using this as a guide, you know, like I'm seeing, okay, these are the textbooks that I'm using now, which are usually also there. So that's a fantastic thing. And also, you know, what is there now on offer, and would they be better than what I have been currently using? So also from the teacher perspective, content and literature to be able to recommend and, of course, force students to read.
It's so great to hear. Yeah, especially because that's how we would like Sage Catalyst to work for you and your students. James, would you highlight something different as the biggest benefit of ebooks, or do you agree here?
I 100% agree with what Rebekah said. I think there's something about the personalization tools that are within ebooks now that are good. Some of the accessibility, you know, features like, you know, controlling the size, color of the font, you know, the text, the read aloud, you know, features highlighting text, adding notes, to be able to search within the content, you know, like a interactive index, you know. I think the students really like those kinds of features. I think especially with our students who are, you know, they have time restraints. I think that obviously the 24/7 aspect of ebooks is obvious as well, isn't it? You know, regardless of time zone as well, because we have students, you know, all over the world who might be accessing them. From a library's point of view, they can't be lost or damaged, of course, which is always useful. I think, I mean, it could be the Sage Catalyst books are good because obviously multiple users can access them at the same time. Where we do have some problems with e-textbooks or ebooks generally is where we can only afford to buy, or it's only available to buy in very small, either single or very small concurrent usage user licenses. And you know, we do get some frustrated students when 3 or 4 of them are trying to access the same book at, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning. But yeah.
Yeah. So apart from the unlimited concurrent access, were there other factors that you were considering before you decided to invest in Sage Catalyst for your library?
Oh, is that me? Yeah. Well, actually, about 2021, we did some research. Librarians, like subject librarians here, and myself, And we wanted to look at the kind of our wish list, our real wish list of e-textbooks that we couldn't buy in electronic forms via our procurement framework supplier. So we built up this kind of wish list, and when we investigated, interrogated it, quite a high proportion of those books were Sage titles, and of those Sage titles, there were only 5 that weren't actually in the Catalyst collection. So then we did some further analysis of the other books that were also in Sage Catalyst, because there were about 600 titles in there, and we worked out that 900 of our 1,300 reading lists would be enriched by this collection. And for our postgrads as well, there was quite a lot of titles in there for for research methods, which was an area that we wanted to expand as well. So yeah, those a lot of the factors. Obviously, the affordability in terms of value for money is something that really drives what we do. We're quite a small institution, so that sustainable affordability as well, something that we have to think about. But our main driver was student satisfaction and being able to provide that content that we wanted to be able to give our students and academics.
Thank you. Yeah, and while Sage Catalyst is a product purchased by the university's library, it's faculty and students who then use it. So of course, that's a big factor. And because of this, Rebekah, I would like to ask about your experience. How do you use Sage Catalyst in your teaching? Has it changed at all the way you teach and how your students learn?
Well, it eases me in my planning and guiding students towards the literature, because I can know with certainty what they have access to. And so, of course, it also ensures quality within the literature that I'm providing or I'm guiding them towards. And so, yes, I guess more from the psychological and maybe even social perspectives of teaching. And so then, of course, I also feel more confident with, suggesting different kinds of sources, knowing that they will have access. And yes.
And do you feel like factors like how accessible the text is for students and things like that, is that a factor when you teach?
Definitely. And see, as I mentioned before, in my earlier days, I was kind of studying the usability of other services, which were a nightmare, particularly in terms of authentication and then, of course, navigating the user interfaces. So once again, also from the psychological perspective, I know that once the students jump in, they can find their way to the book. It's just so easy. And, user experience wise, beautiful colors, wonderful layout. So I'd say from that perspective, absolutely. And, so there is more confidence in being able to recommend and steer students towards certain literature. But then, of course, that also increases my expectations as well, because I know that they have access. So they can't turn around to me and say, oh, but I couldn't borrow the book. So it works both ways in that sense.
Yeah, and do you feel you can maybe, because students have access, support them more when they have difficulties with the material?
Yeah, of course, because it's equally as easy for me to use as it is for them. So I can certainly jump in and have a look and evaluate whatever it is that they're trying to figure out. And yeah, one of my approaches to teaching is just to keep the lines open. So whenever any students actually need to reach out and have a little bit of tutoring or supervision, then they can do that.
Great, thank you. And James, from a library perspective, what difference has Sage Catalyst made to you at the University of Cumbria and to faculty and students there?
Well, it's enhanced and enriched our ebook provision. I did have a little look at some of the data. Actually, we since we subscribed, we did that kind of piece of work. Our NSS, which is National Student Survey score for the library question, has actually maintained just above national sector average, which is something that we're very pleased about. I can't say that Sage Catalyst did it on its own, but I think it was part of our, it contributed, no doubt, to what we've been doing in terms of meeting student, expectations. We have to also justify our spend quite carefully every year. There was a business plan that went in to the original subscription to this, where we engaged with all our teaching and learning leads across the institutes, and it's been good because over the first 2 years, I've seen an increase in usage of Sage Catalyst by 30%. And the cost per use, which is something that my finance director understands, is very healthy, and it's looking good again this year. So again, that in terms of the return on investment and affordability, it's looking good. For our liaison librarians as well, it made a big difference to our liaison librarians being able to provide some of those books that our academics have been desperately asking for many years in electronic format, and to be able to put those on the reading list was very satisfying.
That's all great to hear. Do you feel students would miss this resource if it wasn't available? Do you feel they would miss the unlimited access? And that's a question to both of you.
Yeah, no doubt.
We would go back to the old ways, wouldn't we? and of course, without the skills that we had in the old days.
Yeah, I think our subject librarians would be very unhappy as well if we didn't have it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting point, actually, because I think we had that come up in when we did a webinar previously. We had similar feedback for, I think it was Liz Mallet who came to speak to us, and she definitely said that the feedback she'd got from subject librarians was that it just really takes the stress away from them, from kind of finding the resources and supplying the right resources that faculty are after. And similarly, again, sort of we spoke to Mary Willis, who is a faculty member at Lincoln, and similarly saying that it's just really kind of opened things up for her, and it's in terms of looking for the appropriate resources, it's just so much easier to find what they're looking for. So definitely heard that from other people as well.
So I certainly don't see it as our job to tell academics what books to put on reading lists, but it's really nice to be able to offer, a kind of a coherent package of maybe of textbooks, and maybe even alternatives to ones that have been used in the past. So it's been valuable in that sense.
Yeah, and have you kind of noticed, I don't know whether either of you have that feedback, a kind of a shift on what people are using? So, with a broader collection, access to more titles than they perhaps had previously, that it's changed what faculty are using. I mean, I guess, Rebekah, you might be able to speak to that, but I don't know if you've got any insight to that, James, as well.
Well, this is linked to overall digitalization anyway, because of course we've got access to so much more. And actually I was reading the question and answer comments, and I'd love to afterwards say a lot more related to this, but it's kind of like a very important fact, even related to this, getting your hands on the paper copy and being able to read. Absolutely, from a cognitive science perspective, certainly for our cognition, that is really useful. But of course, we can think of the fact that the whole world has changed. So if we think of the fact that now we have much more at our fingertips, then we do understand that also the way that we read and the way that we understand, and kind of this role of intertextuality between titles is something that has radically changed over the last 10 years, and arguably even 5 years and post-pandemic years. The way that we process information is radically different.
No, that's useful. James, do you have insight, I guess, on kind of from usage data or anything that you've seen in terms of like a wider range of books are being used, or anything that you've
Well,
done?
like I mentioned, the usage of eBooks generally has doubled. I think it was nearly from about 300,000 to about 1 million downloads. And it does seem to be pretty much across the board.
And you kind of made an interesting point, obviously, about it's not for the library's role to kind of determine what faculty should be using, but it's really nice to create that provision. And how have you gone about sort of kind of promoting Catalyst amongst your faculty, or do you have any kind of insight or tips into kind of the best ways that you've done it? I imagine it's probably quite dependent from institution to institution, how you work with your faculty generally, but sort of what were your approaches to kind of promoting faculty so they could, they're getting the best value out of the product?
That's for me.
Yes,
Well, generally, this is why I still see the role of the liaison librarian as being really, really key. It's having those conversations and having those relationships. It's that idea about people being at the heart of these things. So having the liaison librarians who make valuable relationships with the module leaders, for example, and have those conversations. I mean, what we haven't done, and when we first got Catalyst, the librarians certainly promoted it very heavily with the faculty. What we haven't done really is promote it with the students as a package. It was the individual content that we were really interested in, and how it supported the reading list. I think that's something we've been thinking about doing, is actually doing more promotion of the Catalyst collection as a collection rather than as individual titles.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rebekah and James, for these really useful insights. It's been great to hear your experiences, and I'm sure we could keep talking about e-textbooks and Catalyst, but we do want to make a little bit of time to allow from some audience questions as well. We have some that we received before the webinar as well, and then I can see we have some here as well. So I want to conclude the panel discussion part of the webinar and my questions, and then move on to the audience Q&A. So I will hand it over to you, Lorna.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for everyone that's been posting in the Q&A box. And obviously we've, as Alexa said, we had some beforehand. So I'll just kick off with one of the questions that we got beforehand. And it's for James. What was your experience, or what's your experience been of setting Catalyst up? How easy was it, and what support did you get?
It was so easy, I've forgotten.
Always good.
We did get some very good support from Christopher Goldie, who's been our account manager and seen us through it all. But technically, very, very, very straightforward.
Yeah, great. Just picking up on the conversation earlier, obviously with kind of e-textbooks, and Julie's commented, how do we forge ahead with eFirst policy when so many publishers, there's still a notable time delay between the released PDF print and institutional ebook formats? And then, yes, I think this is a really good point, and something that as publishers we are thinking about and working, because obviously with Catalyst, this is a product that we've curated with E in mind, and we're looking at all of our processes of how we think about eFirst and what that looks like in terms of getting content out quickly. And I know with a lot of our ebooks, we are kind of releasing them at the same time as our print books. With Catalyst, because it's a large collection, we kind of release them in 2 batches across the year to make sure that we're kind of picking up all those new books and new editions. But it's a really good point, Julie, and thank you for that. I think it's something that we're all thinking about and grappling with, and definitely a good reminder for us to kind of keep digging into all of those things.
Just say, Lorna, actually, just a couple of question in response to that for me as well. That,
yeah, sure.
In terms of eFirst policy, we've never had an eFirst policy because we can't actually promise eFirst always. We have an eFirst approach, so where affordable, where where possible, that is our approach. But I guess you could have a policy that said that, but we certainly can't ever promise that, and we haven't done here. And the funding is a huge. I mean, Andy's asked a question now. Is a huge thing. I can imagine that. I've said we're quite a small institution, so our funding isn't huge. So we have to look at making decisions about where we think we can get the most return on investment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and just I'll just follow up actually, because sort of there was another question that we got beforehand about how many titles or how often titles are added, and I guess it kind of links to this kind of keeping it releases coming regularly. So as I mentioned, we release titles twice a year, so we review the list annually and then release them a couple of times a year to ensure that we're capturing all the books that are publishing throughout the year. And when we do review the list, we are adding in new editions as well as a range of brand new textbooks. And again, when we review the list, we look at it against usage. And so if there are any titles that have no or really low usage, then we'll be looking to replace those out with other titles that we think would be more valuable, just to ensure that the collection is providing the most value to our customers. But in all cases, we would be communicating with our customers and with you about any updates that we'd be making before we'd make any changes. So yeah. We had another comment and a kind of a question, Christine, sort of using eBooks can be tricky when working with a diverse group of students coming from different technological generations. That's a really good point. Some of who are inclined to print and sort of read, and others who prefer reading online. Sometimes it's difficult to stick to one format. Any suggestions on how to support this user group and induct them into using eBooks? I don't know whether you've got any insight, either of you, Rebecca, like how have you managed that?
Because I thoroughly identify as a person that's working and researching in tech. I'm so non-tech, it's not funny. So this is why I thoroughly empathize with my students. And this is why, as a person, a human being, I leave the lines open. This is why, we go through things together. And if there's any questions, constantly students can come back. And of course, it's always lovely if there are some paper copies available, if and when they're feasible in certain situations, because they're still valuable. So we can't get rid of human beings in this process. And humans, as we can see, even in the shops with self-service tellers, we still need people to stand by them to help people who are scanning their products. And I think that this is also kind of like tying into what James was talking about in terms of reimagining the library space. I mean, kind of freeing up the actual space of the library to facilitate more social interaction rather than having, excess copies of books. Maybe we think of the minimum viable amount of books and, have other accessibility to the, digital space and kind of create environments in which people can connect. And this is one great way of being able to overcome the technological barriers. No one can replace people.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I mean, I think again, going back to the members of staff in our library team, we have a team of librarians who go and meet students, they work with lecturers to go into their lectures to do what we call information literacy training, and a part of that is helping students to understand the benefits of eBooks and other resources. And we don't make it we shouldn't make any assumptions. We shouldn't make assumptions on generation necessarily either. There are some people, different generations, who are very e-tech, and some people who are very young, grown up with it, still aren't very good at using library resources, but they're quite good at using some other resources they have, like their mobile phones or TikTok or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think having the staff who will go in, see students. I mean, a lot of our students at Cumbria as well, we're fundamentally a teaching institution. We do research, but and a lot of our students come from widening participation backgrounds. They have often the first from their family to go to university, so they don't really have family members they can go and talk to and say, oh, this is all scary. So that's what we try and provide in the library. And you know, so yeah, not making those assumptions about what people are comfortable with, and highlighting the benefits. Things like I said, you know, that people don't necessarily know that you can change the font size on the ebook, or that you can use read aloud software and things. You don't have to have a special, you know, a specific learning difficulty or any disability to use those features. You know, they're good for everybody. You know, they so.
Yeah, that's really good. And actually, yeah, there was another question that we had beforehand actually about accessibility features, but I really like the fact that you said that, you know, reminded us that they can be used by everyone. And just so the question was around what accessibility features there are for Sage Catalyst. So we're really committed to accessibility at Sage, and so we've worked really hard to ensure that Sage Catalyst is as accessible as possible. And so we've achieved a 100% Aspire accessibility rating, which we're really happy with. And I think some of the features you can expect are already things that James mentioned. So yeah, changing text size, font size, zooming in and out, changing the fonts, altering the kind of color, so you've got color contrast and compatible with screen readers like JAWS or NVDA and more. So there's lots there that can benefit students, as well as I think also not just the accessibility features, but also all kind of the study sort of notes of highlighting, you know, personal note taking, and actually having those on the go wherever you are, because they kind of function across devices, and you can access books on whatever device that you feel comfortable with. So yeah, good reminder that, you know, there's lots there for students to kind of be seeing as benefits to help them, maybe not necessarily replace print, but as you said, use alongside and have those, you know, when they're out studying or they're somewhere with no Wi-Fi, they can access offline, they can still get their notes, that sort of thing. So yeah, really, really great.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add here as well that when you acquire a new resource, we don't expect you to know it right away. So while I feel that Sage Catalyst is very user-friendly and you can figure it out, we do offer user guides as well, videos on how to use, how the ebook functions are working, how to add those notes, how to highlight, so all the basic stuff. So we do offer that to the library, but also to faculty and students. And yeah, I'm just very happy to hear what you're saying, James, of that the library is not just a space that offers books, but it also offers support to students. And I think that's so important. And that's how I remember it from my university years as well. And I'm very happy to hear that it's still like that.
Great. We just had another question about, and I guess this is just more for you, James and Rebekah, in kind of what emerging technology would you like to be integrated into content to better understand students? And yeah, I guess, have you got any thoughts on what you'd like to see?
Well, this is a juicy question because you can interpret it in many different ways. I mean, one of my research areas is privacy. So, so I have mixed feelings about this. I mean, because I guess from the practical level, it would be lovely to be able to have some guidance as a teacher on how to approach students and see, when we're talking about books, you know, books aren't everything about learning. I mean, it's, you know, a big system of, you know, social interactions and interpretation and cross-reading, etc. And of course, listening, different types of learning types. So in a sense, I guess as a teacher, if I could think of anything that would be useful with AI, for instance, and machine learning to aid teaching and learning, it would be to give some kind of an indication of, you know, what types of things I need to take into account as a teacher. You know, what would be the best recipe for being able to somehow facilitate learning within specific groups of students or even, you know, individual students.
Yeah, great, thank you. I just had one more question, which was, can Catalyst integrate into your VLE or LMS? So yes, it integrates into your VLE easily. Obviously, depending on the LMS that you're using, it might kind of, the steps of that might vary, but it's really simple process. And we've made that possible, because we really want to ensure that there's a seamless integration for students and instructor access, and that actually they can go to places that they're already familiar with and they know how to use. I think that's another point. We want to have it all in one place, so students aren't having to kind of go to so many different places and learn tons of new stuff, because they've obviously got quite a lot going on, so are faculty. So we want to make it sure that it integrates with systems that are already being used. So thank you for that question. I don't know if anyone else has got any questions. I think we've covered most of them.
Actually,
yeah.
I want to return to the sustainability thing again. I mean, because it was excellent. It was spot on, the comment/question earlier on. And I think that if I could possibly even give a tip for future design development, like to be able to work out a way of calculating, the pros and cons of different types of, I guess, literature interaction would be fantastic, I think, for students and teachers, if there would be some kind of an AI-driven calculator within your services, so that we know where to make the right choices.
Yeah, amazing. James, do you have anything else that you want to share or add?
No, I mean, I think the last question was a very, very challenging one, and I think I've actually had come from a meeting this morning with Sconnell, which is our national body for academic libraries in the UK. And we were just discussing machine learning and, and content, library content, eBooks, e-journals, and ways that it can be used. And I think, I still feel as a sector, we're kind of just finding our way a little bit. But I think for me, anything that, I think the question may have been about how do we understand student behavior and how do we understand that kind of thing. But, I think there's something about using this technology to help students, particularly about our type of students we have, to help, kind of suggest other resources that they might be interested in that are similar, and all that kind of. Like this thing already exists. It could just become slicker, and I think anything that aids that that quick access, to content. So things to do with that we have to authenticate. Students have to authenticate into our services, and sometimes that can be a barrier. So just removing any of the barriers, really. But student behavior, that's a tricky one. I think, I need a bit longer to
Yeah, that's fine. That is quite all right. And actually, it's just prompted me I think you were talking about actually thinking about supporting students better, but also sharing the collection more widely, perhaps with them. And I think that's a really interesting point, given that, our textbooks are designed to kind of scaffold learning. There's tons of pedagogy built into them. And I guess with a collection, there's so much there in terms of study skill support, or also, there's different books that are going to perhaps appeal to different students. So actually having that kind of option as well, so they can kind of be self-serving for that wider reading, even if it's not the book that their lecturer has recommended. I think that's, again, sort of something that's just made me think about and reflect on. So I don't think we've got too many. I think that's it. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to Rebekah and James for your time, for your thoughts, your ideas. It's been really valuable. I know Alexa, myself, and all of us at Sage are really appreciative of this. So thank you very much. It's been lovely to have you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that's joined. We hope it's been a valuable time for you, that you've found things useful, that you've kind of got greater insight into eBooks more generally, but also Sage Catalyst. If that you do have questions that you haven't been able to answer, or you think of after the session, that's fine. We will be sending around an email afterwards where we'll be sharing a lot more information, and you'll have a link there to contact your Sage representative, so you can just drop them a line if you've got anything else that you'd like to ask them, if you'd like to discuss Catalyst in more detail, or even have a kind of demo of the product. And we'll be sharing more information, like recording and the title list for Catalyst, and more information. But thank you very much for joining, everyone. We will leave it there. And I just wanted to say, I hope you have a good rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are in the world. But thank you and goodbye.